There are two words your mind never hears as casual conversation. I am. Whenever you speak those words, something within you listens, because you are not merely describing a condition, you are naming the self from which you are about to live. If you say, I am tired, or I am too old, I am never chosen, I am not enough. And perhaps you believe you are only describing one difficult moment, but say it often enough, and the moment begins becoming an identity. Now think about this. You walk into a room already saying, I am always overlooked. Before anyone speaks, you are expecting not to be seen. You notice every interruption. You remember every silence. And you may overlook the smallest evidence that does not agree with the name you have given yourself. The statement becomes a picture. The picture becomes a feeling, and the feeling begins shaping what you expect. But then why can someone repeat, I am peaceful, every morning, and still return to fear the moment life becomes uncertain? Because changing the sentence is not always enough. You may speak peace while imagining conflict. You may declare worthiness while rehearsing rejection. You may say, I am guided, while demanding that every step be revealed immediately. There is something sacred about what you place after I am. You are not simply choosing words, you are choosing the identity through which you will meet this day. And before you choose a new identity, you must hear the old one clearly. Now, I am not asking you to deny what you feel. Fear may be present, sadness may be present, tiredness may be present, loneliness may be present. These experiences are real, and they deserve honesty. But there is an important difference between saying, I feel afraid in this moment, and saying, I am afraid. There is a difference between saying, I made a mistake, and declaring, I am a failure. There is a difference between experiencing loneliness and introducing yourself to life as someone who is unwanted. Do you see what happens? The feeling may have arrived because of one moment, one loss, one rejection, or one difficult season. But when you place it after the words I am, you begin giving a temporary condition the authority of a permanent name. And I want you to hear this carefully. You experienced the fear, but you are not the fear. You lived through the disappointment, but you are not the disappointment. You may feel lost today, but being uncertain about the next step does not mean that lost is who you are. A feeling is something moving through your awareness. An identity is something you begin living from. When you say, I feel anxious, there is still space between you and the anxiety. You can observe it, you can breathe through it, you can respond to it. But when you say, I am an anxious person, the door begins closing. You start treating every uncertain feeling as evidence of who you permanently are. I am not asking you to pretend that everything is well. I am asking you not to turn one wounded chapter into the title of your entire life. So ask yourself quietly, what temporary condition have I been calling my identity? What old pain have I placed after the words I am? And what name am I still answering to? Even though the moment that created it has already passed, because an identity does not remain only a sentence. Live from it long enough, and it becomes a place within you. And what do I mean when I say that an identity becomes a place within you? I want you to imagine an inner doorway. Above that doorway are the words, I am, and beneath those words is a nameplate. And whatever you place on that nameplate becomes the room you are most likely to enter. If the nameplate says, I am unwanted, you enter the room expecting rejection. A delayed reply feels personal. A distracted expression feels like proof. A silence begins meaning more than it actually means. You are no longer simply meeting the moment, you are meeting the moment through the identity written on the door. If the nameplate says, I am powerless, you begin expecting defeat before you have taken the first step. You hesitate. You surrender your authority too quickly. You allow circumstances, opinions, and old memories to decide what is possible for you. And if the nameplate says, I am too old, you may close the future before the future has had an opportunity to answer you. You stop asking. You stop exploring. You reject yourself before life has made any decision at all. But now imagine another name on the door. I am guided. This does not mean that every answer appears immediately. It does not mean that uncertainty disappears. It means you enter the moment looking for direction rather than proof of abandonment. You become more willing to notice an idea, accept help, listen quietly, or take the next honest step. Or perhaps the nameplate says, "I am at peace." This does not give you control over every event, but it changes the place from which you respond to the event. You pause before reacting. You stop feeding every argument, and you begin making room for a wiser choice. Now listen carefully. The name on the door does not magically command the outside world. It influences what you notice, what you expect, how you carry yourself, what you tolerate, and which choices begin feeling natural. The statement becomes a picture. The picture becomes a feeling. The feeling becomes an expectation, and the expectation begins choosing with you. Then, after entering the same room again and again, you may begin saying, "This is simply how life is." But perhaps it is not the only room available. Perhaps it is simply the room you have entered most often. The door is not locked, and the nameplate can be changed. Now, let me show you how this inner nameplate begins affecting ordinary life. Imagine someone preparing to enter a gathering. Before they even walk through the door, they say quietly, "I am awkward around people." Now, what happens? The sentence creates a picture. They imagine uncomfortable pauses, they expect judgment, their body becomes guarded before anyone has said a word. They avoid eye contact, and they speak carefully, they hold back what they wanted to say. And when one conversation feels uncomfortable, they remember it. When someone interrupts, they notice it, but when another person smiles warmly or tries to include them, they may barely allow that moment to register. Then they leave and say, "You see, I knew I was awkward." But I want you to think about that. Was the gathering the whole cause of the experience? Or did they enter the gathering through an identity they had already accepted? Now consider someone who says, "I am bad with money." That statement creates shame, and shame often creates avoidance. They stop looking at their accounts. They delay making decisions. They refuse to learn because learning would require them to face what feels uncomfortable. Then the avoidance creates more disorder, and the disorder appears to prove the original statement. The identity influences the behavior, and the behavior begins producing evidence for the identity. Or imagine someone who says, "I am too old." An opportunity appears, but before they ask, before they explore, before they even allow themselves to imagine what might be possible, they close the door. Sometimes life does not reject you first. Sometimes the identity rejects the possibility before life has spoken. Now, I am not saying that every difficult condition was created by your thoughts. That would not be honest. I am saying that every condition is met through an identity. The identity guides attention. Attention shapes interpretation. Interpretation creates feeling. Feeling influences behavior. And behavior often leads you back to the same conclusion. So the old nameplate remains on the door. And not because it is always true, but because you keep entering life through it. And now you may say, "But I have tried changing my words before." That is where many people become discouraged. And it is where the deeper teaching begins. Now, you may be thinking, "I have tried changing my words before. I have repeated positive affirmations, and nothing seemed to change." I understand that, but the words themselves are only one part of the identity. You may say, "I am peaceful," while your imagination continues rehearsing conflict. You may say, "I am worthy," while quietly replaying every rejection you have ever experienced. You may say, "I am abundant," while spending the entire day emotionally preparing for loss. And then you wonder why the new words do not feel alive. It is because you do not think only in sentences. You think in pictures. You think in remembered conversations. You think in scenes you expect to happen tomorrow. You think in the way your body tightens before entering a room, and in the conclusions you make before anyone has responded to you. So, if the words are moving in one direction, but the imagination, the feeling, and the behavior are moving in another, the old identity is still receiving most of your attention. And this is where people sometimes use affirmations as a form of desperation. They repeat, "I am guided," and then ask every few minutes, "Where is the guidance?" They say, "I am at peace," and immediately search the outside world for proof that nothing difficult will happen. They say, I am worthy, but continue accepting what the old identity taught them to tolerate. Now listen carefully. You are not using I am to persuade life to give you something you believe you do not possess. You are using it to choose the identity from which you are willing to live. Words spoken from desperation ask, when will this finally happen? Words spoken from alignment ask, how would I live today if this truth were already beginning to grow within me? That question changes everything, because the new identity must eventually enter your posture, your decisions, your boundaries, and your actions. And then you must release the demand for immediate proof. If you plant a new identity and dig it up every hour to see whether it is growing, you are still living from doubt. Speak the words, imagine them, and begin living from them. And allow life to answer without forcing the timing. Now, there is another part of this that I want you to understand. The feeling behind I am does not have to be dramatic. You do not have to shout the words. You do not have to force yourself into excitement. You do not have to pretend that doubt has completely disappeared. Sometimes the feeling of a new identity is simply relief. Sometimes it is dignity. Sometimes it is willingness. Sometimes it is the quiet sense that you are no longer required to remain loyal to the person you have been calling yourself. Think about unworthiness for a moment. Where do you feel it? You carry it in the body. It changes the way you enter a room. It appears in the tone of your voice. It affects what you ask for, what you tolerate, and what you believe you deserve. Now imagine dignity. Not arrogance, not superiority. Dignity. It may feel like steadiness. It may feel like speaking clearly. It may feel like refusing to abandon yourself simply because someone else does not understand you. This is why I would rather hear you say, I am learning to trust with quiet honesty, than repeat, I am completely fearless, while everything within you is resisting the words. The new identity does not need to feel perfect. It needs to feel possible. It needs to create a little more space within you. Do not shout the words. Do not plead with the words. Do not use the words to hide from what you feel. Become quiet enough to let them enter you. And there is a story I want you to hear now. Because many people carry an old identity in exactly this way. There was once a traveler who arrived in a small village carrying a wooden sign around his neck. On the sign was one word, unwelcome. He had worn it for so many years that he no longer noticed its weight. He walked into the village expecting rejection. When people looked at him, he assumed they were judging him. When someone remained quiet, he decided they did not like him. When he was invited to sit with others, he refused because he believed they were only being polite. And when the villagers became uncertain around him, he took their uncertainty as proof that the sign was telling the truth. One afternoon, an elderly craftsman saw him standing alone near the edge of the village. The craftsman pointed to the sign and asked, "Who placed that around your neck?" The traveler immediately began naming people. A teacher who had embarrassed him, a friend who had abandoned him, a group that had once excluded him, someone he loved who had made him feel unwanted. The craftsman listened quietly. Then he asked again, "But who carved the sign?" The traveler became still. After a long silence, he remembered. Many years earlier, after one painful rejection, he had carved the word himself. The wound had been real, the rejection had happened, but the event had ended, and the sign had remained. He had carried one old conclusion into every new place. Now the craftsman did not remove the sign and replace it with another. He handed the traveler a blank piece of wood, and he said, "No one else can decide what identity you are willing to carry." The traveler looked at the blank sign for a long time. He did not write, "Everyone loves me." He did not write something his heart could not yet accept. Instead, he slowly carved the words, "I am willing to belong." The village did not instantly change, but the traveler did. The next morning, he lifted his eyes when someone greeted him. He accepted one invitation, and he began one honest conversation. Some people were warm, some were distracted, some did not understand him, but he no longer used every response as a verdict upon his worth. Do you see what happened? The new sign did not control the village. It changed the identity from which he entered the village. And many people are doing the same thing without realizing it. They are carrying a sign created during an old wound and asking every new person, every new opportunity, and every new day to confirm what was written there. So ask yourself, what sign are you still carrying? What identity was formed during a moment that has already passed? And are you still entering every new place beneath yesterday's name? Because the sign around the traveler's neck and the nameplate on your inner door are the same thing. They both tell your mind who you have agreed to be, and you do not remove an old identity by fighting yourself. You begin by becoming conscious of what you are carrying. So how do you begin removing an identity you may have carried for years? Not by attacking yourself, not by pretending the old feeling never existed, and not by covering a painful belief with words you do not yet believe. You begin with awareness. For one day, I want you to listen carefully to every statement you make that begins with, I am. I am worried. I am too late. I am unwanted. I am stuck. I am always struggling. Do not judge the statement when it appears. Do not become angry with yourself for saying it. Simply hear it, then pause and ask, is this a temporary experience or an identity I am reinforcing? Because you cannot change a nameplate you have never noticed. The next step is to create some space around the old statement. You do not always have to jump immediately from I am a failure to I am completely successful. Your inner self may reject that because the distance feels too great. Instead, you might say, I experience disappointment, but disappointment is not my identity. I am noticing anxiety, and I am learning to return to peace. I feel lonely in this moment, but I remain connected to life. I have lived many years, and life may still have something new to show me. Do you see the difference? That you are not denying the experience. You are removing its authority to name you. You may not replace the entire room in one day, but you can begin loosening the old sign from the door. Then choose one new identity, and not 10, not a different phrase every morning. Choose one statement that feels spiritually true and believable enough to live. Perhaps it is, I am guided. I am learning to trust. I am at peace. I am open to new possibilities. I am willing to become new. Choose the identity that describes not merely what you want to receive, but how you are willing to live. Let us take the words, I am guided. If you are guided, what would you do today? Would you make the call you have been avoiding? Would you ask for help? Would you become quiet long enough to hear the next honest step? Would you stop demanding the entire road and become willing to take the step directly in front of you? This is the final part. You must live one action from the identity. If you say, I am worthy, what treatment will you no longer accept? And if you say, I am at peace, what argument will you stop feeding? If you say, I am open, what possibility will you stop rejecting before you have explored it? The action does not need to be dramatic. It may be one boundary, one honest decision, one completed task, one apology, one moment in which you respond differently than the old identity expected. This is where I am stops being an affirmation and begins becoming a way of being. Change the sign, then enter the room differently. Now let me give you a simple way to begin making this identity familiar. In the morning before you reach for the phone and before the world tells you who to be, return to the words you have chosen. Perhaps the words are, I am guided. Say them slowly. Do not rush to the next thought. Do not repeat them as if you are trying to convince someone. Let the words settle. Then allow your imagination to create one ordinary scene in which that identity is being lived. See yourself entering a room with calmness. See yourself making one clear decision. See yourself completing the task you have been avoiding. See yourself receiving help without feeling weak. See yourself responding to an old fear without immediately becoming the person that fear expects you to be. Do not imagine only some distant, dramatic victory. Identity is formed in ordinary moments. It is formed in the way you answer a difficult message. It is formed in the choice you make when no one is watching. It is formed in whether you keep one small promise to yourself. So imagine the scene, feel the steadiness of it, and then take one action that agrees with the identity. Now at night, return to the same practice. Look back over the day gently. Where did the old identity appear? Where did you hear yourself say, I am not enough, I am too late, I am always ignored? Do not condemn yourself. Do not turn awareness into another wound. Simply say, the old name returned, and now I can choose again. Release the statement. Then repeat your chosen words slowly. I am guided. I am at peace. I am willing to become new. And before sleep, place one final picture within your mind. See yourself responding as the person you are becoming. Not perfectly, not without challenge, but differently. The final picture you carry into sleep should not always be borrowed from yesterday. And then release it. Do not demand that tomorrow prove the words. Do not wake up and immediately search the outside world for evidence. Live the identity, take the next step, and allow life to answer in its own time. Because the last room you enter in imagination at night may become the first room you enter emotionally in the morning. But there is something deeper here. The highest use of I am is not simply to attract more possessions, more attention, more status, or more approval. Those things may have their place. But if the identity is still built upon fear, even success can become another form of insecurity. You may gain more and still feel that you are not enough. You may receive praise, and still live afraid that it will disappear. You may reach the goal and immediately need another goal to prove your worth. So I want you to go beyond the question, what can I get? Ask instead, what can life express through me? Because you are more than your age. You are more than your occupation. You are more than your bank balance, your mistakes, your wounds, or the opinions someone formed about you years ago. You are an expression of life itself. You may call that life God, source, divine intelligence, or the quiet presence within you. The name is not as important as the remembrance. I am connected. I am capable of choosing again. I am here to grow, to give, to forgive, and to serve. Now notice what happens when identity moves from ego to meaning. You stop asking every situation to make you important. You begin asking how you can bring peace into it. You stop measuring your worth by what you receive. You begin expressing your worth through what you offer. And this is the deepest transformation. And the words, I am, stop becoming a demand placed upon life and begin becoming an opening through which life can move. The deepest I am is not merely about what you can acquire. It is about what you are willing to become and what love, wisdom, and service can now express through you. And I want you to remember this. The old identity may have been repeated for years. It may feel familiar. It may feel automatic. But familiar does not mean true. And repetition does not mean destiny. You experienced rejection, but you are not rejection. You made mistakes, but you are not the mistakes. You have known fear, but fear is not your spiritual name. You may have struggled for a long time, but struggle does not have to become your permanent address. Perhaps pain taught you to call yourself unwanted. Perhaps disappointment taught you to say, I am unlucky. Perhaps one failure convinced you to answer to the name, not enough. But those identities were practiced, they were not ordained. And what has been practiced can be observed, and what has been observed can be interrupted. What has been interrupted can be consciously replaced. You do not have to change everything today. You only have to stop giving the old identity unlimited authority. So ask yourself quietly, who am I willing to stop calling myself? What wound am I finally willing to remove from the words I am? You may have carried the old sign for years, but you are still capable of putting it down. So now return once more to that inner doorway. Above it are the words, I am. And beneath them is the nameplate you have carried. Perhaps it says unwanted. Perhaps it says too late. Perhaps it says afraid. Perhaps it says not enough. You do not have to remove every old identity tonight. Choose one, see it clearly, acknowledge where it came from, and then loosen it from the door. You are not denying what happened. You are simply deciding that what happened will no longer be the name under which you enter the future. Now place one new declaration there, not as a performance, not as an empty phrase, as a quiet decision. I am choosing again. Your words do not control every event in life, but they influence the identity from which you meet every event. And that identity influences what you notice, how you respond, what you accept, and which direction you are willing to take. You are not pretending to be someone false. You are choosing not to remain loyal to a version of yourself you have already outgrown.